Shattering read Chapter 12. You can't wash your eyes of the visuals. The excited cries of grackles fell from overhead. They were flying in the direction they had been headed in the night before. Luck exited the tent and looked up. 1 or 2 passed over the tree line in the morning light, followed by a few more every minute or so. On occasion, a group of larger birds would float by. "I don't like that," Luck stated, as he worked on getting Petunia ready. Vita had noticed that Faust's bag had made it with them, and she was poking through it, caring little about what went on around them. Her brain was still trying to reject what it had witnessed the night before. She had not changed her clothes, and her hair was left in a ratty mess that stuck out at odd angles from last night's face goo. Her eyes, mottled gray-purple voids, were clearly searching for some kind of resolve. Luck didn't know how to help her other than to give her a moment to go through things and reconnect her thoughts. He needed her to navigate, and she was barely functional. Gingerly, he walked up behind her. She was awkwardly splayed across the ground, going through the small number of worldly possessions her adoptive father had so abruptly left behind. His compass and journal were the 2 most personal items he had, and they had both been in the bag. She placed the 2 items in her lap and started to carefully fold all that remained. "Is there anything I can do?" Luck asked for the 100th time, hand reaching out to touch her as he asked. Losing his brother so recently, and having lost his mom before, he knew how important touch was in times of loss. So many times before, she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She cleared her muddied throat, and then searched for water. "If you need," he started, but she caught him with a finger on the mouth before he could finish. "We need to continue," she croaked. "I will try to show you how Faust seemed to use his treasures to get where he needed to go, but I don't fully understand it. This could go very poorly for us." Another cluster of birds darted by, going in the same direction as all the others. Vita carefully undid the hinge on Faust's hide-a-watch and pulled out his map. She had not seen him take it out around Luck and was unsurprised to see the look of shock across his face. Her vision wasn't the best after crying through the night, and she pulled Luck in for help in close examination of the map. She held the compass out, positioned the map, and pointed to both, asking Luck, "Confirm that says north for me?" He nodded. She found the tan area that indicated the desert they had left, and there was the greenery they must have just hit. The nearby river gave her almost perfect bearing on the map. She tapped their spot excitedly, not feeling quite so lost. "You're sure about that?" Luck questioned to Vita, gesturing at the only river marked on the map in that direction, then at the river near them. He shrugged. It was a decent assessment from where he stood. She pointed to Cedalus, then to Aphthonia. "It looks like we need to go east and then northeast." "Okay, I'm fine with that. But I do need a little help navigating," Luck replied. He pulled out the journal, where Faust had kept his map, and handed it to her. She held it with a newfound respect for the man who was continuing on a path he did not have to. "I don't have a compass. That is something special. Just ask me and I can tell you what direction we're headed." "I think we can do this," Vita said. Working through the vast nothingness she saw ahead of her, she allowed herself a deep, calming breath, then a few more to chase away the jitters. "Let me take a peek around to see if anything looks familiar." She knew from her studies and from helping the nurse to a small number of accident patients back to health that the best thing to do was to keep moving. She had allowed herself to feel it all last night. The loss of Faust cut open all her old wounds about her family's death all those years ago. It felt as though she had bled out all over the ground when she allowed herself to cry, only to wake up in the biggest pit of despair, hungry, crusty, and lost. Faust had been all that she had counted on as family, and he was gone. It was as if her internal fire was out. She needed an external one to keep her going, and Luck was there, so tenderly relighting her pilot light. He watched her as she went towards the river and looked at the ground and trees. When she got close to the water, she started to carefully scan the ground for Mitch and Fletcher's claw prints. She shoved the feeling of their guilt way down to process later. Vita scanned the area and kept going till she touched a tree. There was a slight incline. She followed it in hopes of finding a vantage point. She hadn't noticed that she had lost sight of Luck in the underbrush and was now only accompanied by the sounds of mountain birds and morning insects. The trees started to sink into the ground as she climbed a sharp hill and breathed the top of a nearby tree canopy. Vita watched the sky and pointed to where there was a long line of blackbirds conglomerating. "That's the direction we want to go," Vita chirped. "Were the birds a feature last time you passed through?" Luck contended. "No, but the people were extremely conscious of their environment and seemed to coexist for the most part." She trailed off and bit her lower lip. "They mentioned they had a bountiful year. Maybe they had to discard some of the extra and it's attracting guests? Mitch and Fletcher were lined up for slaughter." Her vocal cords stopped working in her distress from the tragedy of the day before. Vita returned to their camp and packed up. Then they rode, following the sound of the crows. Luck turned on some travel music, and she took up what little there was to do navigationally while holding Faust's journal. She didn't have the mental capacity to open it, but she found a bump on the leather-stitched corner that she couldn't help but fiddle with. The control panel on the back of Petunia's neck also served as a mode of work for Luck in their downtime. He had successfully started piecing together a smear video that they hoped to use against Talbot. He would sometimes ask her to look at something or add her opinion on wording in compilation. It only took a few hours writing before Vita started to recognize the landscape more fully. The crows had been very helpful guides. "We should be there soon. Look out to your right and we should pass the first house in a little bit." It comforted her to think that civilization was near. That comfort dissipated almost as quickly as it came. Vita reached back, grabbed Luck as a large mama bear and her 3 large cubs trooped by. None of the bears even glanced in their direction as they rushed in the same direction of the birds. "That can't be normal," Luck blurted out as a pack of wolves then rushed up past them. It was as if they all wore smiles, chittering with jovial excitement, and daring the others near to chase them. Petunia rounded a hill, and the first house came into view between tree-strewn fields. From a distance, it looked like a scene depicted in an epic poetry. Something squeaked under Petunia, and both Vita and Luck leaned over to examine the ground. Rats were moving in droves, like flowing brown rivers beneath the grass. In some places, the river flowed into the town, and others it went the opposite way. Petunia had left a small trail of squished rodent bodies. Vita stopped the horse with the push of an emergency shutoff button on its saddle. They came to a thudding halt, the world around them some fever dream. They had to continue, however. In less than a minute, small bodies started nipping their flesh. Luck plunged them into madness, both of them too scared to talk. Vita buried into his back, arms tight around his chest. She did not want to look upon the feast that would call the woodland carnivores. "I'm still going to need your help navigating," Luck said, knowing how much he was asking. "I'll describe the buildings I see, and you can tell me if I'm going the right way or not. Okay? If that doesn't work, I'll just ask you to peek." He hummed in affirmation, and she hummed an affirmative back. He was glad her head was tucked down at that moment, because 2 greedy crows parted ways from a mid-flight argument, and a bloody fingertip bounced right off Petunia's metallic head with a ping. Luck threw up in his mouth. They trotted along at an easy pace, and soon passed the large, dark-windowed house. At that point, Vita had resurfaced upon request to point to make sure they were going the right way. A large fox ran by, and Vita indicated they should follow it. The forest blurred by and rang with the calls of thousands of frenzied animals. It made the world feel closed off and stuffy. As they got closer, Luck noticed little glints of light from metallic devices hovering over the area. "I'm going to need you to help me watch from here on out," Luck's voice wavered in concern and disgust. "I understand. I'm just not ready for whatever fuckery is afoot," she answered. "I get that. The last thing I want you to do is look. But I cannot do this next part alone. My cloaking device is on. We cannot be seen, but I think Talbot's robots did this." His careful words brought her head peeking over his shoulder at pure chaos. The drones had made it to the town of Cedalis and destroyed it. Little furry bodies were right alongside the large ones, and they covered most of the town. Some were napping, some were squabbling, but most were feasting on the carcasses of the villagers and the untended domesticated animals. Where blood and bodies were absent, fires raged. They both gagged. Vita pointed out a path they would want to take. They had to dodge chasing animals while trying not to focus on torn limbs and bloodied ground. They turned a corner and noticed 2 rats fighting over a detached eyeball. They moved to avoid the situation and found themselves then dodging a large fluffy rump that nearly crashed into them. As Petunia ran where directed, they looked back on to see an extremely large bear fighting with a massive wild lion. "Can Petunia go faster?" Vita asked. "Not safely. Not right now," Luck answered. "How close is out?" Vita indicated which way to go with a finger while she thumbed the corner of Faust's book, so furiously clamped in her hand she wondered why she hadn't put it away earlier. "That way, and at our pace about 15 minutes, Vita replied, hoping that was an overestimate. She glanced backward. The lion and bear were working towards a victor. The lion had an educated guess, sprung up on its hind legs, and swiped one of its mighty paws at the bear's face, making contact. The bear backed away, and the lion let out a fearsome roar that scattered everything in a 10-foot radius, including the bear. The lion went over to a body lying on the ground and started gorging. It looked up and added an extra growl for good measure, and Vita noticed one of its eyes was white with a pale scar on the side of its face. The same lion she and Faust had snuck past before. It licked at its feast, and the other animals crept back in, causing its ears to swivel in annoyance. Vita and Luck ran over a hill, and the lion disappeared behind them. Vita felt it was odd to twice escape that particular god. There was a small stream of animals running out of the frenzy in their wake, most toting a prize. Luck had missed the whole encounter. He sent a few of his insect entomos out to grab and disarm as many of the surveillance bots as possible. They returned soon after they were released with a total bounty of 9 orbs. He slipped them up his sleeve and stored them away in a concealed pocket. They reached the edge of the nightmare, and their followers dispersed. Their only concern at that point was trying to avoid hitting animals darting between Petunia's legs. The sun was halfway up in the sky before the forest around them became quiet. "I wonder what happened there," Luck stated flatly while rolling one of the monitoring devices from his robe. He had pulled them over for a much-needed break and, after tending to personal needs, started pulling the bot apart. There was a chip inside. He removed it carefully, then pressed a panel on Petunia's side. It took him a light grumbling session, but he pulled out some sort of wire converter that he then plugged into the horse's neck panel and then carefully jammed in the removed chip. He could now access a large number of files at his fingertips, and he did just that, and instantly regretted it. "We can use this against him, but I won't put us through this now." He put the chip in a safe storage place on the horse. "I think the important thing now is to decide where we stay for the night. According to a previous conversation, we could potentially reach the city tonight, or tomorrow, depending on how hard we decide to push ourselves." Vita tried to think about their situation, but it was very hard. They had been through so much, and she was so tired. "I think we hunker down." She had no sooner said it, and Luck had the mobile home activated. Thank you so much for listening to Chapter 12 of Shattering Red. If you've liked what you've heard so far, please be sure to like, subscribe, or do whatever it is that you do to make sure that you can follow the rest of the story. I will include a link to Amazon and my Kofi account down below, so if you would like to purchase the story, you can, or if you would just like to support me and not purchase the book, that's an option too. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys take care.